Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name's George.
My name's Oscar, and this week's quote is by Jill Bolte Taylor. Although many of us think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, biologically, we are feeling creatures that think.
In the episode, we go into Oscar's feelings bypassing all logic and rationality, the wisdom the wisdom of listening to your body, and how we with only feeling. Let's get into the episode.
I want to give a disclaimer about that, surely. we must have just spent 20 minutes trying to get that intro sorted, and that's how it comes up. What was that last point again, George?
How we with only feeling.
Wow, that is wise.
Yeah.
That is wise.
Yeah, it took us a while trying to come up with bullet points. We only had 2.5 after 20 minutes. So
that's not a
that's what we're going for. No, it's actually a great episode. We just didn't want to give away any of the bits in the intro. Enjoy the episode, guys.
Pretty nervous about this one, actually.
Oh,
in
really?
A good way. I was quite excited. Yeah, I was just doing because I've always write out my notes on the computer, so I've got them in front of me, and
yeah,
I was like, oh my god, I feel quite like adrenaline-y. I've invested quite a lot of time this week in doing notes for it, purely just because I'm just super interested in it. It wasn't I must put time aside this week.
Yeah,
but I'm looking forward to getting into it.
All right, let's get into it then.
Yeah,
let's go.
So the quote for this week is by Jill Bolte Taylor, and it goes as follows. Although many of us think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, biologically, we are feeling creatures that think. It's from her book, My Strength of Insight. I think we touched on it last week with talking about the subconscious and talking about these currents that actually guide us. We have an idea about how we relate to the world, but that's not actually how we relate to the world. And I think that this quote captures that really nicely. It's actually that we've got a very strong view that the head rules the heart, and that we live in a very rational and together kind of, we make decisions and they're not particularly affected by how we feel about things. I think I'm more talking on a cultural level, in that I feel like our culture is quite like that. It thinks of itself as quite rational and very thought-based decision making, but that actually the evidence suggests the opposite. The evidence suggests that actually we're feeling creatures that think, in that how we feel in our bodies and how we feel in our lives is essentially shaping our experience of the world and completely affecting how we think about the world, ourselves, other people, but that we're not aware of this process. And that's where the danger is it's not that it's a problem that we're feeling creatures that think, but the problem is that we think we are thinking creatures that feel. And so we don't have awareness of what is actually dictating our lives, which is how we feel about things. Mm-hmm. So the best and broadest example I can give is that if I wake up and I'm feeling good, is say if I meditate, I've slept well, I haven't been drinking the night before, I feel fresh, right? This is a pre-lockdown example. If I go into town and I get on the bus and do all the ordinary things, people are so helpful. People are just like smiling at each other, giving little nods to each other. I'm like walking down the street and I'm like, everyone is in the sickest mood today. Like everyone's so nice, and they keep on doing nice things for other people. It's so weird because I feel really good. And look, everyone else feels really good as well. That's weird. It's so obvious when that happens. And then obviously the other side of that is, if I'm ill and tense and I feel vulnerable, people are very unkind and threatening and like icky and difficult, and everything's really grating. And the reality is that those worlds are just totally different, and they're completely shaped by how I feel about things. But I like to think I've got a very clear view of things at all times, but that's just not true. So I love how prominent this view is, And that's what I want to explore is how prominent this view is that we are thinking creatures that feel, and how wrong that is.
It is so interesting how that the feelings that you have end up controlling the thoughts, and you can sort of notice that the feelings are the thing that comes first, and the thoughts are built on top of that. Thoughts are always either reactions to things that you've learned or understood, or like reactions to how you're feeling about the moment. I was trying to think of it the other way as well. Like, can you argue that we are thinking creatures that feel? Because through your thoughts, you can kind of change your emotions and change your feelings sometimes, or you can try and kind of steer yourself in another direction. But the reason that you're trying to steer yourself in the other direction is because of how you feel. So it comes back to that. When we're born, for example, that's a time where we don't really have complex thought. We just have pure feeling. And we're vulnerable, and we're very fragile, and we don't have control over our environment at all. We just feel and express, and hopefully we have some caregiver, someone who can think for us, a parental figure who can help us when we're hungry, who can comfort us if we have toothache, and do that thinking part for us. And sometimes there's going to be like a baby is say if they're teething, there's not actually anything that the parent could maybe get like a teething toy or comfort them, but they can't just make the baby stop crying instantly. And as you grow up, get to the point where we are now, you understand about logic and society, you learn language, cause and effect, all these things so that you can look after yourself, so that you can, get your own food, so that you can do all these different things. But I think that can lead to people feeling like their feelings are a problem. They've got to like sort them out. They've got to do all these things. But if you imagine that part of you that was a baby that just feels is still there, that's still hungry and confused and scared, and can feel incredible amounts of excitement at doing certain things. All of those primal emotions of this that are exactly the same as when you were born are still there within you. So once you think of it like that, certainly for me, it's changed how I relate to myself and relate to my feelings. Because if you're feeling scared, are you just going to kind of ignore that and neglect that feeling and just hope it goes away, try and drown it out with other things while it's screaming in the background? It's kind of a choice that you make of how you want to parent yourself, really, how you want to care for those feelings. It's been something that I've definitely done recently, is just becoming more compassionate about that side of myself, and realizing that often it just doesn't understand what's going on. It doesn't know that it shouldn't be anxious in a certain situation. It doesn't know all of these things. It needs help, and it needs to be looked after. It can obviously have, you've got your intuition, and it can actually notice things that you won't notice. And it's not just this defenseless thing. There's lots of very powerful things that it can do. But it's really important to remember that often your feelings are just confused and they don't know what's going on. And I think it's really important to have compassion for that part of yourself.
Yeah, it's really nice to bring in this, in a way, a hub that we built on top of as we've got older. If we start with feeling, then we learn to communicate to better navigate how to get those needs met as we become an adult. It's like tools. Our needs for safety and food, all of these things, they're the same now as they were then. You can boil down our feelings down to those, particularly like negative feelings, down to, well, all feelings will boil down essentially to very core needs that we have: to feel accepted, to feel safe, and they are indicating whether or not that's being met. They are not necessarily doing that accurately all the time. As you said, like you can feel anxious in like quite obscure reasons for things that you needn't. But at the root, they are essentially trying to indicate that needs aren't being met. And it's really nice to bring it back to being a baby, because that's when so much of our conditioning happens, is that age, and that's how we're born. Yeah. I think one side of that I found interesting was that this area of how sometimes, because I think there was almost two sides to what you were saying in there. There was one that feelings are an indicator of something important, and another side which is that feelings are not necessarily accurately indicating that thing, that that it's not a very accurate tool necessarily all the time. I'd really like to go into that side of things too, but I kind of wanted to focus in on how feelings can be signals for, and I guess it comes into intuition as well, but feelings can be signals for almost like a guidance system for how we then relate to the world on Stringer Fields. So Stringer was my secondary school. We used to go to these fields on a Friday night because there was no one around and we could just get drunk and be crazy and make lots of noise, and there wasn't houses like too close by. Occasionally the police would come along and chase us off, but that was the fun place to go on a Friday night. And there was one occasion where we were all sitting in a big circle, and I really didn't like the people that I was with at the time. Everyone's got this eagle eye to look for vulnerability or look for things to pick up on, because there's such a lack of confidence by everyone. You get this social hierarchy forming, as it often does at school, where either you're a bully or you are bullied. And there's this funny exchange that's going on, that either you're vulnerable and you're going to be picked on, or you have to pick on someone else. And often it would end up in these situations where there was this horrible atmosphere that something was about to kick off. And this was what it was like on this particular evening. So I was sitting there, and my way of dealing with that kind of atmosphere at school is to be very quiet. I'm sitting there, no one's really saying much, and everyone's just kind of waiting for the next thing to kick off, something to happen, right? Someone who was essentially quite a scary person and a person you just didn't want to fuck with, he broke the silence and said, "Oscar, you seem like an all right guy, but you are a fucking mute." And I was kind of dumbstruck. Like, I didn't really know what to say to that, obviously. Like, it was just really out of the blue and a very violent thing to say. And this guy's kind of sidekick said, it was something along the lines of, "Yeah, I bet you sit in the fucking dark and listen to classical music," or something like random like that. And it was just one of those moments where it was like, I realized, okay, I'm the victim in this situation, and I just feel fucking horrible, and I don't know what to say, and I don't know how to react to this situation. The evening rolls on a bit, and I've managed to kind of just blend into the background and just avoid conflict somehow. And my friend's actually meant to be staying with me at the end of this evening, and people are continuing to drink. And, this was just like a horrible situation to be in with people that I didn't really like. And I just had a really, really uncomfortable moment earlier. My friend wasn't willing to leave. I obviously was making signals in some way, but again, this was quite unconsciously. I was making signals that I wanted to go, and my friend, he wanted to stay. And in a second, I just got up and I just ran off. I literally just sprinted home. And I guess me running home really feels like one of those moments where actually, despite the social implications of me running off and leaving my friend was like shouting after me. It was kind of humiliating thing to do, because people were very aware that I just ran off for seemingly no reason. Despite all that, my body and my feelings were just saying, "You need to fucking leave, man. Like, you need to get out of here." And I was suppressing that for such a long time that it just did it for me.
Wow.
It just got me up, and I just ran off. And in that situation, my feelings were more of a guardian and the wiser side to me, actually, which was the whole time saying, you're in the wrong place. These are the wrong people to be around. The atmosphere is horrible. You feel really tense. You feel really unhappy here. And I still wanted to stay, but my body was taking me out of that situation, whether I liked it or not. I was leaving. I think that was an example of that intuitive or feeling side just taking over.
Mm.
Yeah.
The first thing that I thought of when you first read out the quote was I'd heard a long time ago about the fact that people think we have a stomach to feed our brain, but actually we have a brain to feed our stomach. And that really is how things have evolved. The most simple form of life is just ingestion, digestion, and excretion. We're essentially just a tube. Stuff goes in, it's metabolized, and then it goes out. And your brain and consciousness are things that have arisen to aid that process. But don't get it twisted that like the stomach that's the bit that's in charge. It's incredibly rare for someone to consistently not do what their stomach tells them to do.
Mm.
Because you're just, eating and drinking and finding ways to get food and protect your stomach. It just struck me as such a weird little flip, but it's the same sort of thing as we have here. We start to get overinflated with all of our logic and feeling that we must be superior and that this is the main function, is the intelligence. But intelligence is an ancillary function to get sustenance. It's nothing more than that. It's not like we have a stomach to feed our wisdom and our art and stuff like that. Like the art and everything that we create and do is a byproduct of an intelligence that arose purely just to feed itself and to find creative solutions to getting food and reliable ways to get food. But essentially, that's where it's come from. And I thought that really mirrored the same thing I was thinking about, your feelings imagining them as a baby inside of you. That those feelings are the real thing they're at the core. And it's easy from this to start thinking about it as a combative relationship, like can damage your ego to be like, oh shit, all this time I've just been like running around, going to my job, going to school because of this like bag of food sat inside of me. Is this really the thing that's like controlling my life? Like my infantile emotions and my intestines. But it's like a caregiver position. You're charged with protecting and looking after this thing. So you're here as the guardian of your stomach and your inner child, and you're here to protect it and help it thrive and enjoy and get the things that it needs. And I think that's a really nice way to flip the thinking, especially in self-development. A lot of things are like about dominating your body and dominating your mind. And if you think of that as part of you that's a child, that's horrible. Like that's not how you want to behave towards a part of yourself that you love. You've got to find like somewhere between, there's the side of neglect or smothering or mollycoddling. Sometimes you really need to just be compassionate if you're feeling sad and comfort yourself. And there are times where you're going to need to be a bit more hard on yourself, or, same as if you're raising a child, you can't just give them everything they want all the time. That's not going to be the best for them. So it's not a thing to be like, oh yeah, just follow your feelings. They're the one that's in charge. You just need to placate your feelings and do whatever they inspire you to do. And that's somehow just follow every whim that you have. But it's developing a better relationship with your feelings. Yeah. Compassionate, but also helping strengthen them and getting the most out of them.
Yeah. I think it's nice how you brought in the humbling view of essentially the feelings and this need to eat and survive. That's the core. That's at the real base of things. And that we make things very complicated and have very the thought comes in after to justify what we're doing and create these models and models of the world and create meaning and importance and all that. But at the root, we want to survive. And yeah, I think it's really important to bring that reflection in regularly. I've got a tattoo which says time crumbles things, and I think it's in the same area. It's essentially saying that all these grand, important, very meaningful things that we build with our minds, they decay and they go. And it's important to be humbled by how simple things are at their root. Of trying to reflect a bit on why is it that we've ended up with the dominant view being that we are in control, that we can dominate, that essentially feelings are a little side thing that we can successfully switch off and numb out. Because I think it's a cultural thing. There's obviously other cultures which have more respect for feelings and intuition, but I would say that our culture doesn't. What that's led to, I think, is feeling alienated from feelings, and then also having a sense that feelings are quite scary because we're so unfamiliar with actually experiencing them, actually going into our bodies and experiencing what's going on. They become these very wild, irrational movements within us because they do actually dictate our lives. That our body, what's going on in our body is so strong, whether we choose to be aware of that or not. If we refuse to look inwards and become more emotionally intelligent, it ends up becoming very toxic feedback loop of pushing things away and not wanting to look, and then it kind of bubbling up more and more strongly. And I think I've made a connection between that and the real push towards like the mental health movement and well-being movement, of spending such a long time in society really being quite alienated from ourselves and how we feel about things, and having this very unhelpful view that feelings are kind of stupid or something, that they don't have value in our lives. I
think, like what you were saying with how they can kind of be seen as scary or just these crazy, wild things that we don't understand. I think, a lot of the reason why that arises is from neglect. Like, again, to just go back to that analogy of a child, if you ignore your child and don't spend time with it and take time to understand and see what's going on, then of course you're going to be surprised by its behavior, and it's going to do things that you completely don't expect, and it's going to have tantrums and do wild stuff and make no sense to you. It really, the analogy of a relationship just works perfectly for it, because you do need to get to know it and understand it, because and once you have a better understanding and you kind of check in more regularly, I've definitely found that my feelings make more sense and I'm more comfortable with them and comfortable experiencing them, and just constantly trying to drown them out by watching TV or Netflix or listening to or doing loads of things to fill up your brain and try and regulate your feelings with external things. If you watch a horror film to feel scared or a comedy to feel happy, that is going to have an impact on your emotion, but you're going outside to get things, so you have like emotional reactions to things. But it's such a good process to just see how you're feeling in the moment and just notice that. And if you do that and check in, then you can see how things change, and it can be an indicator, like you said. It can be a really useful little thing to notice, maybe something's not right here.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you can feel bad and you can, logically feel like things are okay, but maybe there is something else that you haven't noticed logically, or it might be that you just need to kind of comfort your feelings and say, it's going to be okay. And you might be feeling anxious or sad, but maybe there's not anything that you can do about it. You just need to be there with the feelings and just let them play themselves out.
Yeah. I guess what we're talking about really is emotional intelligence. I think having a receptivity to what's going on in our bodies. The interesting thing that I've noticed about that process over a really long period of time, and I'm going to actually just super briefly define that. For me, emotional intelligence and really having a very integrated, I don't want to say relationship to my emotions, because that makes it just seem very separate. It feels kind of like I'm a brain having a relationship to my body. But I think having, I've got a little moth on my microphone.
Oh, people are going to love you blowing into their ear.
Oh yeah.
This is then to an ASMR podcast.
You can just chill there. It's fine. Practically what my experience of it is it's like shining a light into my body and just seeing what is there. It's almost like if the body is this space, what is in that space, and actually just directly looking inside. And that's what checking in is to me, is looking within the body. So my experience of doing that over a number of years is that initially I think emotions and feelings felt a lot more confusing because there's such a backlog of really tangled reactions and feelings that are, like, it's a mix of current reactions to things and unprocessed reactions to things, all tangled up inside, and you can't really distinguish one from the other. So you might just be feeling this sense of dread or discomfort, and you're looking around like, why would I feel this way? And you can't work out where the root of that is, because it's such a mess there. It's really difficult to see. But I think, as we mentioned last week, with finding ways of clearing the subconscious and processing these things, of which there are many tools to do that, I've definitely found, I guess particularly on like a meditation retreat, for example, where you're spending a lot of time being very aware of what's going on, that after a certain amount of time, that quietens down to the point where it's very clear the distinction between something you're reacting to in the moment and when some unprocessed trauma or feeling is arising just in the body. Because I think often with trauma, past things, I think they'll often come up when they see an opportunity that they may get processed. So it might be when it's quite quiet and not much is going on, and these things come up and say, are you willing to look now? Are you willing to have a look now? And most of the time it's no, and then you just continue to, you go to the fridge or whatever. But like, as I'm talking, I'm thinking about it. So I don't know if that's completely true or not. I'd have to investigate a bit further, but there's definitely, it's very, very interesting to notice the distinction between when you're reacting to something in the moment and when it's something very clearly from past unprocessed things. And there is a distinction, and that becomes more obvious with learning to be emotionally processing things. Yeah. This moth, it's really sticking around. It's like, and you can kind of see it here.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And that's why you should watch the video version of the podcast.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's like, it's quite small.
No, it's massive. It's massive.
So I've got another story. It fits in the area of this belief that we have that we are in control, and that we know exactly what's going on.
Brilliant. So, let's go.
Yeah.
This sounds like a nice, reassuring story.
I was 19 at the time, and I'm sitting in a club, and it's fucking loud. And essentially what's going on is I'm being given an intervention. So I'm sitting there, and Miles and OJ are saying, we really, really don't trust this girl that you've been hanging out with. We're really not thinking that she's any good for you, basically. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, man, like, you just don't understand, man. Like, I'm like, I've got it all under control. Like, it's fine. I know she can be like that with other people, but like, it's honestly not like that with me. And just to give a bit of context, so at the time I like hadn't had a girlfriend, still a virgin. In a way, it felt like the first time when I was really being paid attention to by a girl, and that they thought I was attractive seemingly, and I was really attracted to her. And there were potentially a few red flags popping up at different points. She would do things like accidentally invite me and other guys that were very much like me, very much like kind of awkward and like quite confused by my presence being there. Like we'd be sitting in the park and then this other guy would show up and I'm like, who's this guy? Why? Like, but then you can't say anything because it's just like we're just mates, obviously. But like, it's not like that. So it's this kind of odd situation where you're just like,
wow,
this feels very deliberate. But then another girl would show me interest in a club or something, and she would get fucking angry, really, really angry. And she also actually gloated about how she would manipulate guys to me. But obviously, I was like, I'm exempt from this. Obviously, this isn't about me. Like, I'm the one she's telling. So obviously, it wouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
And at this point, when the intervention's happening, a number of my friends are being like, who is this person? Like, this is just, this smells totally wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I end the conversation. I'm not heeding their advice at all. And a few days later, me and this person we're out and they've got like really drunk. And I put that in quotations, and like falling over drunk. And her ex comes along and she straightens up and just completely soberly walks across the road and gets into an argument with her ex and then slaps him round the face extremely hard.
Jesus.
And in that moment, it was like I was being slapped in the face and woken up to what was going on, because it was such a, everyone was saying, and all the indications were there that this person wasn't to be trusted, but I couldn't hear that. I couldn't hear that because, you know, like, yeah, you could say that I was being led by my dick, whatever, like you could say that, but the reality was at the time I was terrified of sex. Like I was scared of intimacy. But this person offered me a potential to be normal. They seemed like they liked me. I felt special around them. And somehow my needs were being met by their presence. Those feelings were strong enough for my rational mind to basically be taken offline. All the things that were supposed to tell me that things weren't right, it didn't matter at all. And I really don't consider myself, but who the fuck does? But I don't consider myself one of those people to be seduced into a situation like that, basically. But it doesn't matter, because the feelings, when they're strong enough, it will just say to your rational mind, no, I've got this covered.
Yeah.
Just trust me on this, right? And it was just so funny in that moment of her slapping that guy. It was just like, fuck. Like, just shit. And then I just walked off.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me a bit of, you know how you can be dreaming? You can be in the most bizarre situation that clearly makes no sense. And within a dream, you just accept it. You just think that that's real. And like, oh yeah, of course. Like, we'll just get on the bus to Jamaica from Hove. Like, like just whatever crazy thing comes up, you would just kind of accept it. And even though that's just within a dream state, it shows that there's conscious experiences where logic can appear to be there, because within a dream, you feel like there's some thread of logic. Oh, we need to get here because of this. Oh yeah, I need to get the bus because I'm not going to walk to Jamaica. It seems like there's some semblance of logic when there's none, when it's all a complete fabrication that is completely unbelievable. And just the fact that that can happen with a dream should tell you that it's possible for things of that nature to happen in your waking life as well. And it can be kind of a scary concept, I suppose. But yeah, that's what's up. Sometimes you'll just justify whatever's going on.
Yeah, and that's what this quote is talking about. And I think that is what happens in society. I mean, you only have to look at Trump as an example of people willing to completely put down just the rational argument. Everything is pointing towards this person's not to be trusted and that their views on things are illogical. But there is a strong feeling, there is a strong emotional investment in some, you're resonating with some aspect of what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredibly obvious in politics, and it's incredibly obvious in society as a whole, where you can see the collective irrationality, just the collective kind of, you're just like, how the hell is this happening? But because there's an emotional pull, you justify it afterwards. And that's happening on a global scale. But the thing that I want to counter that with is just to re-emphasize that I think that there really is an intelligence to our feelings, and that intuition, and as you briefly mentioned, and I think it is worth like emphasizing, that our intuition and our feeling about things can very, very often indicate things that our thought mind just isn't aware of. It's too subtle, or it's too, as we talked about last episode, you know, it's, we can only be aware of a certain amount at any one time, and our feelings about things can indicate when something isn't right, when we're not feeling right about someone, when we're not feeling right about a situation. And it's a bizarre thing to work with. It's really much more like sailing or something, or working with the wind. You're not going to be able to control your feelings. It like you're not just going to be able to just like, this is exactly what's going to happen with you. And I think that's why they can be scary, but also they are very, very powerful. And it's about learning to use them as a guiding system within yourself and within your body, because these currents of intuition and currents of intelligence are like rippling through us all the time. A lot of people are completely alienated from that, and they're missing out. You know, that's a real loss, you know. And then a lot of people, and I wouldn't say that I'm an expert at it at all, you know, like I think there's many people that have a lot of familiarity with how to let their feelings guide what they do in a really skillful way. Now, I just wanted to bring that in because I'm aware that we've talked a lot about the potential negative sides to being unconsciously led by feeling. But I think with awareness and a respect for it, it can be an incredible guide.
Well, that seems like a nice place to end the episode.
So before George reads out next week's quote, just really wanted to thank you for listening. It's just been amazing hearing from people, and just knowing that people are out there listening and like enjoying what we're doing is just so encouraging. So thank you for being one of our early audience members. It would be great if you could subscribe on whatever you listen on, because that helps us grow. And if you can think of anyone that you think would enjoy this episode, then just give it a share with them. That would mean a huge amount to us. And if you wanted to donate the podcast, then we've got I'm going to call it Ko-fi, because Ko, you'd say that as Co. You wouldn't say that as Ko, right? So I'm going to call it a Ko-fi account.
Yeah, that's basically what I call it.
The premise is that you can buy us a coffee. So like £3 or whatever if you've enjoyed the episode. So what is next week's quote, George?
Well, this one is actually a little bit of a poem. I'm not going to read the whole poem. It's still a fairly short one, but I'm just going to read one little stanza, I think. I don't know what they're called. It's 4 lines. I'm going to read 4 bars of a poem. All right. By Douglas Mallock. If you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley, but be the best little scrub on the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree.
Nice. That's cheeky. I like it.
Sweet. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good think about the quote. And if you got any thoughts about it, we've just set up an Instagram. You can let us know about this week's quote, or whichever is the latest quote. Just let us know your thoughts and we can include it in the episode. And if you want to email in, if you don't have Instagram, it's kwim.podcast@gmail.com.
The Instagram is know what I mean, one word, .podcast.
Sweet. Yeah. All right. Not confusing at all. Very simple.
Very clear. Yeah. All right. See you next week.
All right. See you next week, guys. Peace.